I had maybe been 7 or 8 years old. Was sleeping in my room, which was at the end of a hallway. In that hallway, there was a basement door. That basement door was right next to my doorway. I had already become really like into horror stuff. I think I think at this point I had already begun browsing the paranormal board on 4chan to loop back around. I was sleeping in my bed, or trying to, and I heard someone walking down the hallway. My parents would do this thing that I think every parent did. It was like maybe 10 or 11 o'clock, and they would just check to make sure that their kids are actually asleep. I was used to like the door opening a little bit, see if I was awake or not, as I was either hiding like my PSP under the sheets or like my Game Boy Advance. Almost every night I was sitting there just playing Star Wars Battlefront 2 on the PSP with the really shitty controls. And when my parents would walk down the hallway, I would turn the display off, but half the time it would just not pause the game, so I would just die. But during this time, I think I was really big on reading. This was when I was blowing through like Lovecraft's entire like series, like all of his books. I would sit in my room and I would hide the book right here. I'd be laying back and I would have the blanket over my head, and I would have a little flashlight, like a really shitty dollar store flashlight that I would shine, and I would hold it like right under my neck. I would point it at the book and I would read. And it was one of those nights where I was reading. I had just finished watching a scary movie with my parents in the living room. So they went off, I went off into my room. Then I heard the footsteps, and I just kind of assumed that it was my parents, you know, checking in, whatever. I wasn't really scared beyond like, oh no, I'm gonna get caught reading. So I closed the book, put it down on my chest, and then slid it slowly to the side of my bed, put it down on the floor. And the light, I just slid along to the like crease where the wall was, slid it in between the bed and the wall. And I just kind of like sat like a mummy back, closed my eyes, slowly lifted the blanket like up to my chest, and I heard that the footsteps were heavy, and I did not recognize them. I have a very good memory, especially with sound. Just from hearing someone's footsteps, I can tell who it is. I hear footsteps, and they're really heavy boots in the hallway. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. My parents are asleep. And now that I think about it, I didn't hear the door at the end open, because there's like a slight suction in their room, where when they open the door, you could hear like a little gust of air push in. It just from like the nature of how our house is set up. So I would hear that, and then I would hear slight footsteps. I didn't hear any of that. I just heard boots. And I heard a door open, but it was not that door. So I assumed either my dad woke up and maybe I didn't hear it or something. But I'm just sitting there and I'm like, that's not my parents, I think. So I hear them walking around, hear the bathroom door open slightly. Someone walk in, and then instead of using the bathroom, just walk out. The door closed really quietly, still just sitting there, waiting. I'm expecting it to be my parents, but at the same time, I'm having everything race through my head because I was just reading horror. I had just finished watching a movie, that one really bad M. Night Shyamalan movie about where the plants start killing people. The Happening, yeah, that was the one. I thought it was really stupid, but at the same time, afterwards, I was like, that's horrifying. So I had those images in my brain, and I was just like sitting back, pretending to be asleep so that whatever is in the hallway can leave. I hear 2 sets of footsteps now, and I'm like, okay, those are both really heavy boots. My mom does not weigh that much. My dad might, but there's definitely not 2 sets. And they approach my door. My door, at this point, does not have a doorknob. It is literally just a door and a door frame. So anyone can push it open. When I was a kid, I would put stuff like right on the opposite side of the door to prop it up and stop it from being pushed open. Or like if it's pushed open, like I have my piggy bank in front of it so it makes an ungodly sound. That day I didn't have it just because I know that my parents are walking around during the night. But I was like, oh, it's no big deal. The door slightly opens and I hear footsteps get close, like directly to the frame. And I have my eyes closed. I'm sitting there and I just hear, "Should we take him?" in a really deep voice. Like, no one at this point in my life I had met had a voice that deep. Like, it was like a gruff, older man voice, like maybe 50s, 60s. Directly behind that voice I heard, "No, he's still awake." And I immediately panicked. Like, I shut down. I didn't have a fight or flight response. I froze completely, white as a sheet, sitting like this with my arms across my chest. I take my fingers and I pick up the edges of the blanket, slowly slide them up to cover my face. It is pitch black in this room because I always keep the blinds closed, always like being in total darkness in that room. It was always 10 degrees colder than the rest of the house because the sun rose at a different angle, and I would just always keep the blinds closed. So it would be like, even during the summer, boom, 10 degrees colder. I'm sitting there in complete darkness, and hearing "No, he's still awake" is just like the most terrifying thing that I could possibly imagine. So I sit back and I'm just waiting for it to like end. I hear walking down the hallway, walking around the house and stuff, and then I hear walking down the stairs. And I realized that whoever they were walking down into the basement. When I was a kid, I genuinely thought that our basement was like haunted or something. I didn't want to be down there for long because we have really thin corridors and stuff, and at the end of those thin corridors are really dim lights that you need to flip on with a light switch all the way at the end in the darkness. Hearing whatever that was walk down into the basement like solidified my terror of like there was just something malevolent inside this house. And I knew I wasn't dreaming because I was sitting there literally pinching myself. I knew it wasn't fever dreams, it wasn't sleep paralysis or anything, because like I was cognizant. I reached for my flashlight and I grabbed it to know that I was still like there. Like I was grabbing myself under the blanket, just like waiting and waiting and waiting. And I don't remember when exactly, but eventually I fell asleep. I think it was out of exhaustion. And I woke up the next day and I got up and went like everything was normal. My dad had already gone to work, just me and my mom. As I'm sitting there eating my like bowl of cereal in the kitchen, my mom, she just says, "Hey, were you in the basement yesterday night?" And I turned around with a look of sheer like abject horror. I was like, "No, I was not." Like it sounded like I was like clearly guilty. But my mom was like, "Oh, you weren't." Like she didn't like connect anything yet. So I explained that while I was sleeping, I heard the door open and someone walking up the stairs, and that they like pushed into my room. They said some things and then they walked away. And my mom was just like, "Oh, okay." And she seemed like she was perfectly calm, but she immediately got on the phone with my dad. And as I was getting ready for school, I'm like packing my book bag, I hear her on the like house phone with my dad. They're having like a back and forth. They're trying to keep hush about it. My mom was like, there was dirt on the steps to the basement, and the basement door all the way down that looks like a cellar door, the entrance to the basement, was open, with dirt tracking in from outside. I asked them about it and they were like, "Yeah, nothing happened, whatever." When I was a kid, the next day I told everyone in my school and they were like, "Oh, you're just fucking with us." I mentioned it to them recently, and apparently my dad had mentioned some scary stories from when he was young, like how he had a ghost experience and stuff like that. I mentioned what I experienced, which was that there was a spirit in the room, and then you guys were saying that there was stuff in the basement, and my parents were just like, "Oh yeah, no, that happened. We didn't tell you." From their perspective, they woke up. The basement door was wide fucking open. There were dirt, like boot steps, all over, like into the bathroom, walking up to my room, and then back down into the basement. In the basement, there was a trail of dirt footprints, leading all the way out to a door that was unlocked and opened, but it wasn't like they left it wide open. They just closed it and it didn't click the doorknob in. When I went to school, they probably called the police or something. They searched the house, they took samples of like the footprints or something, and then they left. because my mom didn't have any other information. They were just like, yeah, someone was in the house, they said some shit to my kid, and then they left. And then they were like, we've got all that we can, we will contact you for any further information. And then they just never did that, I guess. There was never like an attempt at reaching out. And I was like, okay. Well, shit, that would have been, I guess not good to know, but like, really makes sense. All the puzzle pieces fit together, and I was like, oh, well, guess that works. A little bit of unresolved childhood trauma has just fixed itself and dissipated into the meaningless memories of my brain. If I was in their position, I would have done the same thing. I wouldn't tell my kid, like, yeah, someone broke into the house and was about to take you, and then decided not to because he would be too loud. Because that would like derail a normal childhood forever. That would be lifetime paranoia, which already existed in me, so it didn't really affect me much. But ooh, I was at the time thinking that it was a ghost story. Now that I'm looking back at it, I was almost kidnapped, or someone was robbing my house. And when they realized that I was there, they bailed because there was a kid. And they knew that I was awake. I was probably going to make noise. And they just dipped. There was absolutely nothing out of place except for both doors being left open and footsteps being everywhere in the house. I can vividly hear the voices of both of them, like gruff older man voice and then slightly less gruff voice of, should we take him? Brief pause and then, no, he's still awake. From that point on, it was stressed to me, stranger danger. As a kid, I didn't realize why, but realistically, my parents probably were like, holy shit, we were targeted. I did notice that, like, when we would be in public, I was kept under a tighter leash, and my dad, after this point, started doing something that, if I was in public with my parents and we were, like, at a store or something and I would wander off, instead of looking for me, my parents would just leave me to scare me into not wandering off on my own again. And I think that this was like as a response to that. Don't leave our sight or shit will happen, and we can't, like, we already had one scare, we don't want it to happen again. To this day, I still don't realize, like, I don't understand what the goal was there, and why, if the goal was taking me, why they just pussied out at the end when they realized I was awake. Like, oh no, the one kid that we came here for is awake? Damn. Let me leave. Like, it seems like a little bit sunken cost when you're already in their house with footprints everywhere. Like, bro, I know what size Timbs you wear. You're not getting out. Come on, if you're gonna do it, at least go all the way. Like, you can't half-ass the kidnapping.